Let me unlock my computer and begin. So I'm going to be kicking off today by giving you the lay of the land with virtual reality. You're going to hear from some amazing speakers here in this room. I want to say one thing I'm really excited about virtual reality is that there are some kick-ass companies really killing it here in Toronto and in Canada in the virtual reality and augmented reality space. We should be really proud of what's happening here in wearable technology in general. How many of you have been to a Are Wearables event? Any of you? Great. Okay, well, I run Are Wearables, which is a regular free monthly event out of Mars that explores wearable technology. Wearables including smart glasses, head-mounted displays, biometric shirts, shoes that light up, lots of stuff, lots of fun stuff. So if you're interested in wearable technology, come see me after. It's kind of, I guess, the thing that I've been focusing on for 4 years. And today, what I want to start with is really talking about the magical experience of virtual reality. So imagine that here in the room, I am a dragon and you guys are all unicorns. Or we're just fed up with the gray sky out there, and now this entire class is on a beach in the Caribbean. This is the dream of virtual reality, to be able to teleport ourselves to brand new worlds. And this is becoming more and more of a reality today through a lot of advancements in the VR space. So you probably all know what VR is because you put up your hand, but just so that we're all on the same page, virtual reality is an immersive 360-degree experience which makes you feel like you are in the content, not watching the content. And it's able to do this because, for the most part, the content is in 360 degrees, which means that you're able to look around, up, and down. Because of the use of stereoscopic display, it gives it that depth that we have in real life. And as most of the devices, and I think you all received a cardboard when you walked in, as most of the devices either have intrinsically or utilize smartphone devices for their head tracking capabilities, you're able to more naturally look around the content as if you do in real life. So for the most part, instead of you now doing what you're doing now and sitting in a chair and watching a screen that is a flat screen, you're now able to put that screen on your face, which allows for you to go beyond the screen and enter it. So there has been a lot of work. This is Wearable Lansbury, by the way. Wearable Lansbury. She trended on Twitter in San Francisco, I think, a week and a half ago, but she's been around for a long time, so enjoy. The virtual reality space really did have a banner year this year. We've seen big advancements from Facebook and Oculus. Google made huge pushes in the space. Samsung, Microsoft, Apple rumored to be playing within virtual reality. So the big change this year was that a lot of the big guys are on board. So when people ask, why is virtual reality going to happen now? It's because the big players are on board. There's a lot of money. And when there's a lot of money and a lot of big push behind the companies and organizations that have the distribution networks and the marketing dollars, it most likely is going to be realized. You may have heard, for example, that Google partnered with the New York Times just recently and back in November to ship out 1 million Google Cardboards to subscribers. So that's a good example of getting these necessary devices, because without the VR devices, there is no VR, in the hands of the mainstream. And Oculus, which is now owned by Facebook, launched the very first consumer-ready virtual reality headset just a couple weeks ago, the Samsung Gear VR Consumer Edition. So again, these big players really putting their money, their energy, their focus on virtual reality as the next big thing. But you may be saying, Tom, like, we've already been down this road before. How many of you went to a mall or Canada's Wonderland and used a virtual reality machine? People are really excited about that. Me too, I was too. It kind of looks a little bit like this kid on the far left. A little bit. I think that looks even better than the one I did. So virtual reality is not new, but that doesn't mean that because it was around before, it's going to fail now. All new waves of computing have a very long journey, and you may be aware of it or you may not be aware of it, depending on how much you've been focusing on the space. So virtual reality, arguably, you could say that the first sensory experience happened with Sensorama back in the 1950s. It was like more like a station like this here, less like a head-mounted display where you would stick your head in, and it was a multi-dimensional experience, one of the first of its kind. But where virtual reality really took shape was in the Air Force. So Dr. Tom Furness, who has been coined the grandfather of virtual reality back in the late 50s, early 60s, was tasked with the need to create a device that would allow pilots to see better. So that's where this all started in the military. In the early 90s, we started to see virtual reality hit the mainstream. And it was perhaps 1992, which was the debut of The Lawnmower Man. I'm going to see lots of smiles. Yeah, people love that movie. You're all going to search for it on Netflix, and it's going to have that annoying search result that says movies like Lawnmower Man, because they don't have it in their catalog, last I checked. Why? It's old. The Lawnmower Man really helped put virtual reality on the map for a lot of people in the mainstream. After The Lawnmower Man, leading up to virtual reality's bust in 95, there were some great examples of virtual reality into the hands of the consumer. And these are some great examples of it. Mostly they were in the arcade, or if they were home devices like Nintendo's Virtual Boy, they were still focused on gaming. Therapy was actually another huge focus for virtual reality back in the 90s. But come 95, it was clear that the technology wasn't ready. And then it kind of just went away from the consumer side, and then researchers and technologists continued to improve upon what was needed to get us to today. So actually, this screen on the left is actually a screenshot from Virtual Boy from Nintendo. Really shows you how far we've come with the virtual reality experience. If you've had a chance already to try out your cardboard, you can see that the technology has really advanced to the point where it feels more real. And of course, that's the biggest focus here. If virtual reality is going to really be what we want it to be, it needs to feel real. It doesn't need to necessarily look real. It could be cartoonish. Again, like I said, I can be a dragon, you could be unicorns. We can unfetter our imagination, but it needs to be convincing. And you're going to hear these words probably today: immersive, presence. These are really key buzzwords in the virtual reality space, which are really alluding to this necessary need for virtual reality to feel like a reality. So why is virtual reality happening today? Well, just like in the wearable space and in IoT, we've seen a tremendous amount of advancement in technology. Miniaturization is huge in terms of sensors, especially like the gyroscope, high pixel density LCD screens, which can either be put in standalone devices, but most importantly, we now have a computer that has a much more powerful and high fidelity screen than the Virtual Boy and the virtual reality devices and the large computers that existed in the 90s in our pocket, which is our smartphone. And I'll talk a little bit about mobile VR and why that's necessary for this space to succeed. Advances in real-time computer graphics also aid in the ability for virtual reality to be here. So the conclusion is that the technology has finally got to the point where virtual reality has a great starting point. And with Moore's Law and how fast things are continually evolving, we can definitely see that we're on a path that in as close as 5 years, we may be able to be staring at something that feels like we are in a reality. Now, I want to go through a couple of the components of the virtual reality space. So most important thing in the virtual reality space is the device that lets you peer into reality. So virtual reality devices are like blindfolds. They take you away from this reality and they teleport you, or they bring you into another reality. This is different, virtual reality, VR, than another term that you may be starting to hear or be very familiar with, augmented reality, which is AR. Many believe that VR and AR are on the same spectrum. We can talk about that after. But augmented reality allows you to see through a screen and that would allow you to have digital constructs in the real world. So for that example I gave about the dragons and the unicorns, which you might be getting sick of, and I don't know why I said that now that my entire presentation is about this, but in virtual reality, we would be recreating this room in the virtual world. I would be that dragon, you would be unicorns. Augmented reality, we would see BitMaker Labs And when you look at me through your augmented reality device, you would see a dragon head on my head and unicorn heads on your fellow colleagues. So the difference is that augmented reality allows you to see the real world, but have those digital constructs in the real world. Both AR and VR require you to put something on your face, and this is the foundation of the hardware that's necessary for you as a user to use virtual reality. And the proper terminology is head-mounted display, or HMD. So you may be also hearing in the news the use of goggles or headsets. I'm not a big stickler with buzzwords. I don't necessarily care what you call them as long as you're using them. But the technical terminology that's being used is head-mounted displays. And in the HMD space, we're seeing two main categories. One is mobile VR, and the other is standalone devices. Mobile VR means that the device that you're using requires your smartphone in order to work. So the processing power, the graphics capability, and the screen itself are all being provided by the smartphone. So devices like Google Cardboard, which is revolutionary, once just thought a gimmick at a developer conference as like a party gift. And Samsung Gear VR are really good examples of this. And in fact, as much as Oculus is behind the Samsung VR, as well as a standalone device, which means that this device has all the necessary screen capabilities and is usually tethered to a dedicated computer that provides you with the graphics capability and the processing needed to display content, such as the Oculus Rift. As much as Oculus is focused on the Oculus Rift, John Carmack and the team have really expressed how their efforts are all in on mobile VR. Why? Because you already have 50% of the product in your pocket. And it also brings the cost of a mobile VR device down. Now, because you've already invested in $700, $1,200 worth of the device, you can simply just get a Google Cardboard for $5, $20, or the Gear VR for $99. And so that's a huge advantage to be able to get these devices in the homes of everyday people. On the standalone or dedicated device side, we're seeing a lot of players. I should add that Google Cardboard and Samsung Gear VR are the only devices that you're able to really purchase now as consumer devices. On the standalone side, such as the Oculus DK2, there are some developer kits that you can purchase, which means that they are functional, but they're more geared towards the developers, which a lot of you raised your hands, so perhaps you're using them already. But it means that when you get them home, they're not going to be as easy of a setup. That's the big difference. One of my favorite devices that is on the market today that's not in Canada, but it's in the States, is the ViewMaster VR, which is in the bottom. Why? Because I'm a geek, and I love the fact that it's a ViewMaster. It literally is just... I'm not going to say it's just, but it is a Google Cardboard. So just like what you have in your hand with a cardboard, the ViewMaster opens up, you slide your smartphone in, and you're able to view all the Google Cardboard content. But what I love about the Mattel ViewMaster is that it's actually geared towards children. And so they have the ViewMaster cartridges, and they've reimagined what this would be in this modern world. And so they actually play around with both augmented reality and virtual reality. So they allow you to see through your smartphone, through the screen, at the cartridge to, for example, they have space, wildlife, and cities. So if you look at a cartridge with space and you're a child and you look down at I think it's called a cartridge, but let's just call it a cartridge, the wheel, you'll actually see using augmented reality a floating spaceship in 3D, like an animated floating spaceship. And then when you move your head up and press down on the lever, it'll take you into a virtual reality experience where everything goes away and now you're in space and you're able to explore space and see the spaceship in more of a space setting. So it's a really great educational tool. And because it uses your smartphone, it's only $20, right? So I definitely know that it's going to fly off the shelves in the States. If you have a chance to go across the border and get one for your niece, nephew, or son or daughter, you'll be very popular. HTC Vive, Sony Morpheus, Oculus Consumer Edition are all great examples of standalone devices. These dedicated devices will have higher fidelity graphics. They're going to feel more real. They have much more oomph and power. But most, if not all of them, are tethered to computers, which means that you may have to upgrade your computer, or in the case of Oculus, they're actually going to be selling it with a dedicated computer for you to use. So that's a big thing to note. Now that we're moving up the chain to a much more powerful experience, the big thing to note is that they are being still tethered to a device. So that's not how we exist in the real world today. And as you see with your Google Cardboard, having that freedom to be able to twirl around without cords is actually really essential. One device that's here in Canada being built out of Markham, which is the top right, is a Sulon Cortex. The Sulon Cortex, yeah, anybody working there, or what's the move for? You tried it out? Oh, okay. Love it. So the Sulon Cortex is actually a dedicated device that is untethered, and like the Mattel Viewmaster, it does AR and VR. And so that's one device to watch. It's coming out of Canada, and I know in talking with a lot of my fellow tech writers, when we tried it out at the Consumer Electronics Show last year, it was perhaps one of the most favorite experiences out of all the ones that we had tried. So some of the software, now that we've talked about the hardware, obviously with the hardware enables content experiences. And so another part of the ecosystem are the developer tools that you'll have access to be able to create games and content. And so Unity, NVIDIA, all are providing tools and education around how to create the necessary content for virtual reality. Oculus launched their Story Studio to help filmmakers and content creators create what they need in order to put content on the Samsung Gear VR and the Oculus device. So I suspect that we're going to see more and more software development kits or SDKs and other tools to make it easier for you as developers and content creators to get your content onto these devices. Especially as we start to see more of the platforms get in the hands of people, the next real focus is going to be on the developer community to give the people things to do with the device. Another way to get content on the device is through cameras. And so there's a lot of advancements in camera technology that we're seeing, and the biggest push is on 360 content. So as I mentioned in the top of my talk, that one of the biggest differentiators with virtual reality is the ability to experience content in 360 degrees. In order to do that, now you have to do a lot of stitching with your photos, but there are some cameras that are out there that are able to use spherical displays and provide auto stitching for you to be able to take a picture, and it will allow for that to already be in 360 degrees, ready to go on your VR device. The Ricoh Theta up here is a great little device for $250. I have it if you want to come see it after. It's this really simple device that takes 360 degrees with a push of a button. The GoPro rig, Nokia's new camera, are a little bit more of the hardcore side for those that are really into film. The Nokia device is $60,000, just to put that out there. And the Bubble Cam is actually a spherical camera from Toronto-based startup called Bubble. And I believe that one is $1,000 or so or less. So a lot of different options depending on what you want to do. Are you a content creator? Do you want to tell your own story via video? Just like you would on YouTube, then you maybe want to invest in some of the better cameras. Are you just like me and you want to take a picture and be able to see it in a cardboard device? Maybe you want something like a Ricoh Theta that makes it even easier. Also, Google launched an application recently, actually just this week, that allows you to take pictures for cardboard. It's called the Cardboard Camera, so you can download that from the Google Store. So even software solutions are being created to utilize the existing technology you have in your pocket, again, that smartphone. Another part of the ecosystem as the head-mounted displays and the systems get up and ready are the peripherals. So all the accessories that are starting to put your body into the experience. So the one thing about virtual reality right now is that we're bringing our eyes into the experience. So what we see makes us feel like we're there, but we're not. The rest of our body is not feeling that experience, and so we're much more than just our sight. We have smell, we have taste, we have touch, And so there are a lot of companies out there that are starting to really try to figure out, how do we put our hands in VR? How do we put our feet in VR? How do I feel like I'm being tackled if I'm being tackled in VR? How do I put the rest of my body in virtual reality, including smell, for example, as well, with Feel Real being a good example of that. The STEM system here on the left is a series of controllers that you either hold in your hand or you put on places on your body in order to have you be recognized within the virtual reality experience that uses their SDK. This allows for you, for example, to be in a demo that I did where you're in a room and you see a shelf full of merchandise. If you do not have a controller, the only real way to be able to point and interact with that content would be using a mouse or a keyboard or a keypad on your computer, where with the STEM system controllers, you're able to use the controllers as hands and actually interact with the item, pick it up, move it around, and throw it, or whatever the experience may be. And then also the Virtuix Omni is another example of a company that's trying to make you have a much more holistic experience within virtual reality by putting you on a treadmill that allows for you to be able to walk around the experience instead of, again, using a joystick or a keypad or a mouse to do so. And that's like, if you do play a lot with Oculus, and even with cardboard, you'll find yourself wanting to move. You'll find yourself wanting to use your body naturally in virtual reality. So a lot of these companies are just trying to facilitate that natural need. So, of course, the last part of the ecosystem is the content. And just like in the smartphone space, your iPhone and your Android device is nothing without applications. Virtual reality, it will be nothing without content. Content meaning film, meaning television, meaning gaming, meaning applications, you name it. And so this is a necessary part of the ecosystem. On the left is a short film called Butts, which you probably already got, in virtual reality. It kind of makes you feel uncomfortable and delighted at the same time when you experience it in VR because it's so close to you. And then obviously on the right is an example that you probably watched a million times on YouTube, and it never gets old to watch people with VR. In fact, if you get the chance just to look at each other, it's going to be really interesting. But one of the roller coaster experiences. So these are just a couple of examples of content that's out there. Butts was actually part of the Kaleidoscope Film Festival, which was a VR film fest that came here to Toronto. There's a lot of different filmmakers that are playing with short films and the use of 360-degree content. What's great about Butts is that I could be watching him, or if I feel a little shy or just a little bit irked out about it, I could look away and see what else is happening in the surrounding areas in that short film. And as you can see here with the woman to the right, it speaks to this feeling that you're present. You feel like you're in the content, which is one of the biggest differences. Okay, so let's just talk some numbers. So this opportunity for virtual reality. So virtual reality headset shipments are expected to reach 30 million by 2020, according to Juniper. CCS Insight did a great report, and all this is available online. But they did a great report which forecasts that by 2018, the VR space will hit over 20 million headsets shipped. In comparison, this year was only around 3 million headsets. So there's a big jump that's going to happen in the next 5 years. And I think these are actually really conservative numbers. When it comes to the industry, DigiCapital has been cited as one of the go-to reports that have sized the revenue capabilities for the AR and VR space, augmented reality and virtual reality space. And they've indicated, I believe quite rightly, that the AR, VR space will have a much greater opportunity than even mobile presented. So whereas mobile, as we all know, has disrupted every single industry, so too will augmented reality and virtual reality. And so the Ubers, the Facebooks, the Instagrams of mobile are yet to appear in the VR and AR space. But what's interesting to note here is DigiCapital's breakdown of how that share of revenue will be played out by 2020. And you can see that the majority, $120 billion of that $150 billion industry sizing is in the augmented reality space, which is something to note because right now there's not a lot of noise being made, at least in the consumer sphere, on augmented reality. So definitely something to watch. And again, there is a very distinct relationship between AR and VR. Another thing, and you can't really read it here, is that if you read the slivers of the pie, AR's potential seems to be more in enterprise, utility, productivity, kind of day in, day out use, like what we're used to on our smartphone for the things that are allowing us to live our lives, whereas virtual reality, some of the categories that you may not be able to see is theme parks, film, games, so much more of the entertainment side. I think there's a lot of arguing there. I don't think it's necessarily going to be that clean cut, but it's something to note in how analysts are seeing the space. So before I go into a couple trends, there's tons of opportunity in virtual reality and in augmented reality. A lot of people, well, I have heard a couple people say that in virtual reality, maybe even from an investment perspective, that it may already be a little bit too late to get into the game from an investor perspective because of where it is. I think there's still a tremendous amount of room for investors to play within the VR space, especially in the AR space, because the AR space seems to be slightly behind where VR is. So these spaces are definitely ones to watch if you're looking to fund and make a return on investment on technology. Fundamental, foundational technologies, software tools, enabling technologies, advancements in computer imaging and display. All of these are great things to look at if you're an investor. These components that are really going to enable what the future of VR and AR is going to be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. As an entrepreneur, the time is ripe to start thinking about a startup utilizing these new technologies. Again, if AR and VR is going to eat mobile, is going to eat the world, then this is the time for you to think about how to utilize this new technology in a way that's different than mobile and not just push mobile into augmented reality and virtual reality. Obviously, developers and filmmakers, as these platforms become more and more available, you have more platforms to play with to be able to express your creative nature and create experiences for end consumers to utilize. And of course, we're seeing a lot of brands utilizing virtual reality, mostly now from a marketing angle because it is so new. As soon as you put something meaningful out, like the Star Wars virtual reality experience that came out on December 2nd this past week, it's one of those go-to things. So if you are a manager of a brand or you're working with a brand, most likely you'll be talking about utilizing VR as part of your overall marketing campaign, maybe not necessarily from an engagement perspective as much as it is from a hype and a PR perspective, and that's okay. Okay, a couple trends. So here are 6 things that I see shaping up in the virtual reality space already, and they're all at various maturity stages. But the first thing that's happening in the VR space is a new way to view old media, okay? And you might have some people, I'm hoping, come up here to talk about the difference between 360 content and VR content. This is some of the conversations that's happening in the virtual reality technology space, the people that are working in VR technology. So you may know that Facebook now supports 360 videos. Google or Alphabet enabled YouTube to now have 360 videos, and all of their videos are now cardboard supported. We have those devices like the Ricoh Theta, which allow for you to take 360 degrees. Google just launched their cardboard camera, which allows you to snap a picture. You literally can snap a picture right now of what's happening here and then view it in cardboard later on. You should all do that today because that's kind of cool. But is this virtual reality? This is the question that has been debated in the media and in the VR space. Is this VR? Is just seeing a 360-degree picture virtual reality? So I'm not gonna feed into that debate here in my presentation, but it's important to note that probably the first way that you as a consumer or your mom or your sister is going to experience virtual reality is to view photos or watch a movie, so old mediums, in a new way, Okay, so now, instead of viewing a photo that is from one angle, or maybe you've seen panoramas because those have been around for a while, now I'm going to take pictures of my experience, my trip, and then put on my virtual reality headset and feel like I'm in the picture. So the difference is, instead of viewing the picture, I'm now in the picture. And I'm seeing the same thing with movies as well. So still experiencing watching Netflix, watching Hulu, watching a movie, but not being not actually experiencing the movie. It's still this. There's still this separation between the two. It's still old media, still photos and videos, but being re-experienced in the virtual reality format. There's nothing wrong with it, and I believe that this is a great way for people to be introduced to virtual reality. But virtual reality can go well beyond this. That's the point. But this is, I think, the number one trend leading into 2016 and moving forward, especially as you look at the success of Instagram. We're a photo-obsessed culture, and so this will be the new way for us to view photos. And as soon as Facebook enables Instagram to be cardboard or Gear VR enabled, I think that's going to be one of the tipping points for photo viewing. So viewing photos, the GIFs on the right are examples of being immersed in a new environment to watch Netflix or Hulu or a movie. So this is the Netflix app for the Oculus Gear VR. So it definitely is virtual reality, but again, it's you being in a living room that's not your living room, sitting down watching a movie. Okay, which is it sounds kind of silly. Like, why would you do that? But if you think about I'm Gen X, so Gen Y, Gen Z. Maybe yourself, who maybe you don't have a TV at home. You live in a studio, or you're just in your room, and you're watching TV on your laptop all the time. Like you watch YouTube videos, Twitch, whatever it is. This is actually a huge change. Now, you can be wherever you want, and you can have this expansive room in front of you and this large screen to watch the content. So it's actually, I think, a game changer in the virtual reality space, but I wanted to make that delineation between experiencing old media and virtual reality versus some of the other experiences that you're going to be able to do. The Samsung Gear VR cinema is actually a cool experience. You can choose different cinemas. This is just showing like a traditional cinema, but one of my favorite things to do is just watch a movie on the moon. It kind of feels cool. So I mean, and again, it's that ability for you to watch content in almost like a much more natural way. And even just think about it from a body standpoint. If you are watching a lot of content on your laptop, most likely you're looking down. Like, it's not the best body position. So even having the content heads up so that you're looking straight out and you're able to experience with the same content in a much more natural body position is going to be a game changer. And I will have to say that I was skeptical at first to ever think that just being positioned in a 360 photo and looking around would be meaningful in any way. But one of my favorite places to visit in the Gear VR is the Gear VR photo gallery. And if the photos are taken with high quality, it's really breathtaking just to be in the middle of the Sahara Desert and looking around, even if it is just static. It does feel different, and it is a new way to experience something that you've experienced tons of times online before. So then we move into still experiencing content, but I call this the best seat in the house. And this speaks a lot to live content. So whereas taped content, I'm using tape, I don't know if we even should use the word taped anymore, but recorded content was what we talked about before. We're seeing a lot of activity in live experiences. So sports is an example, or also concerts, debates, and porn, right? Which porn wasn't really live, but I just put it in here because it feels live when you do it. So they say. So the NBA and the Warriors provided Gear VR users with the ability to sit courtside at a live game. Jaunt enables Coldplay experience where you feel like you are in the front row or even behind the scenes. So it's this new point of view is kind of what I wanted to point out here, where you feel as though you are there witnessing some experience while you're in the comfort of your own home. That's why I put the other one that we won't mention again in the far corner, because that's really what it is. So whereas we do get this with that Netflix experience where I am in another place, it still is experiencing that traditional media where I'm watching a movie and I'm removed from that movie. Here, now we're moving down that chain where I feel like I'm at the game, I feel like I'm at Coldplay, and I feel like what she's feeling. Probably not. Maybe a little different. That's a huge trend. And by the way, not to dismiss this is going to be a big driver in the VR space. So the same reports that I mentioned before indicate that gaming, gambling, and porn will actually be the three pillars that will push virtual reality forward. And actually Kink, which is a huge porn studio, just made a huge announcement last month about their push into virtual reality. Just like 3D TVs and HD TVs before it, a lot of the display technology that we adopt is being ushered in by this very powerful sector that we're blushing about at 10:30. So another trend that I'm seeing is the use of virtual reality to allow for you to train, educate, practice. So Strive VR and Eon Sports VR are two companies that have created virtual reality experiences to enable football players like quarterbacks to review strategies of previous games to help them better strategize and become better players for future games moving forward. This isn't new. If you've ever played football before, going over videotape of past games is something that you do on a regular basis, but it doesn't feel like you're there. The difference is now that quarterback can actually feel like he is in a specific position and see it from that new point of view. So feeling like you are there is a huge change in the way that you'll be able to learn, remember, and prepare for the time when you are in real reality to do the same thing. So this is a huge trend that I'm seeing, especially in sports. A lot of activity in virtual reality in sports. But it's also on the education side as well. This is Google Expeditions, which is a program that Google is rolling out to schools to allow for kids to go on virtual reality field trips to different places. So it's the ability for you to be able to learn by utilizing virtual reality to experience new experiences that you would not be able to do before. Another trend is therapy. And as I mentioned, back in the 90s, there was a lot of play with virtual reality in therapy. We're seeing this also again in this new round. So the use of virtual reality to get over phobias is huge. So fear of falling, fear of spiders, fear of clowns, that's mine, fear of dolls, whatever it might be, whatever you're fearful of. That was another one of mine. Let's stop with mine. So then utilizing virtual reality in order to help you acclimate to your fear in a very safe way. So we're seeing some examples of utilizing virtual reality for PTSD, for example. This is a great example of if you're afraid of public speaking. This is Speech Center, which was created at the Mobile VR Jam, which is aimed to help you present a speech in front of people staring at you. And this just gets you in the mood. So we all know that practice makes perfect. That's why the other example of putting the quarterback on the field to analyze things is a key strategy. This is another way. If I'm in a room, for 15 minutes every day with a huge spider, and I'm just kind of chilling with the spider, and over time I'll get more comfortable with the fact that there's a spider near me. And the goal is that when I'm in the real world and there's a spider nearby, my arachnophobia has been lessened or removed, right? So this is kind of the idea. But also beyond just phobias, we're seeing the use of virtual reality to help with meditation and anxiety. This is guided meditation by a Chicago-based company called Cubicle Ninja. It allows you to choose different calm settings that you then sit on the beach, for example, and be walked through a meditative experience. So a lot of great activity outside of gambling, porn, and gaming that is providing a lot of meaning and value to people that you'll be able to get access to. So whatever your fear is, there'll be an app for it. And whatever anxious situation you find yourself in, there'll be an app for it to help you guide you through that. There are already apps today on your smartphone to do the same. The difference, again, is just that separation gap between the two. it wouldn't be as meaningful if you had a spider on your iPhone, beside you at all times. It probably wouldn't really bother you, just be like, that's a wallpaper or a screensaver. But having it in the room with you, and as our graphics capability becomes better and better and better to the point where it looks like there's a spider beside you, that's when it's really going to be a game changer. This is one of my favorite uses for virtual reality. This is another trend. And it's something that has been said a lot before from the likes of some great VR pioneers like Chris Milk from Verse, where VR is a really powerful empathy machine. So we all know that if we have the chance to talk to someone and we hear their story, we feel closer to them. But now imagine being able to actually walk a mile in their shoes and be them, to feel like you are seeing their life through their eyes. This is the promise of virtual reality, and we're already starting to see the use of this, especially in the news and in journalism, which is why the New York Times is making a huge push into virtual reality. So the example on the left is the use of virtual reality to allow for you to do a gender swap. This is from a experiment from Be Another Labs. So the ability for you to feel like you're in a woman's body or a man's body, et cetera, et cetera. This is being used a lot in transgender studies as well. But overall, just this idea that now you could be a different age, a different race, a different gender, a different ethnicity, a different social demographic. How powerful would that be to live a day in someone else's shoes? How would that change the world? This is where we start to get little tingly feelings of what VR potentially could do to this reality. And this example on the right is a new short film from Verse in the New York Times app, which I really recommend you download for your new cardboard. The NYTVR is the application. It's free. They have a couple of short films. This one's called Displaced, which is about Syrian children, 5 children that are Syrian refugees. They just did a Paris vigil, and they'll be updating content on a regular basis. So we all know that news, telling stories is so critical to who we are as humans. And so this ability to take that story further, where you're not once removed from it, but you're in it, is going to be a game changer, and it's starting. So I call this one Disney World on Crack. It's one of my last trends. This is the emergence of a new amusement park. You may have heard of The Void, which is being created in Utah, which is utilizing 4D entertainment, even 5D, 7D, you can call it whatever you want. What I mean by that is that they're creating their own HMD, combining it with haptic vests and peripherals and walls and places that you walk around to make you feel like you're in another world. So you can see on the left that he's actually holding basically like a brick that he thinks is actually a lantern in virtual reality playing this game. This is Mind Ride. This is Airflow. So the ability to use apparatus to inside it feels like you're actually flying. So there's fans and light and a harness to actually make you feel suspended in the air. If you've ever been able to try VR in combination with a moving chair, I was able to do this in China, and I'll tell you very quickly that there was this little chair, and then you sit in it, and there's a seatbelt, and everyone else was not using the seatbelt, but I put the seatbelt on because I didn't know what to expect, and this chair literally just moves like this, and I'm like, okay, what is this going to be? This can't be anything. And everybody that was using it before, all the Chinese people were just smiling. They were all having a good time. I put on this headset. I don't know what it was. Maybe I didn't eat enough, but I put it on, and it was one of those. It was my worst nightmare. It was one of those swings at Canada's Wonderland that go like this. And just watching it sitting down would have been fine, but just this little movement this way felt like you were going way up into the stratosphere, and I was getting very sick, and I did make some utterances. A little bit of screams were happening. So a lot of, I think, viral video came out of that because there was a lot of smartphones after around the chair that I was in. But it's this ability to bring in that physicality with virtual reality is what I want to hit home on here. And, of course, it'd be amiss of me not to point out that there's a lot of activity happening in the gaming side as well. The left is showing a much anticipated game for Oculus Rift and Project Morpheus, Eve Valkyrie. Technolust is a really fantastic experience for you to try if you have the ability to while you're here, as well as gambling. So Jackpot VR is on the right. So the ability to go into a casino and actually play games is something that we're seeing as well. Okay, quickly, because I'm running out of time, here are some of the things to look out for in 2016. So I should add, all those trends that I talked about, we're starting to see them shape up. I would say that they continue to be really core trends in 2016 and 2017. Like, there's still a lot of room for advancement in all of that. So even though these are predictions, what I mean by predictions, they're like new things that I see adding to the mix in 2016 and 2017. The first is VR is a very lonely experience right now. You go into VR, you're alone. Okay? We don't do that. I mean, oftentimes we want to be alone, so maybe this is a good start. But VR is going to get a lot more social. So Oculus Alpha, which is on the left, AltSpace VR, which is on the right, are good examples of new software which are trying to put everybody in one place at the same time. Right now it's happening on an avatar level. So it's kind of like Second Life, right? That's kind of how it may be. And if you've read Ready Player One, which is a great book that you should all read before the movie comes out, this is kind of like this experience of having an avatar and being able to be whoever you want to be in a virtual world to do things together. AltSpace VR does really cool excursions. Like, you can go to a volcano together and talk about the volcano eruption. It's really cool if you ever get a chance to try AltSpace VR's technology. Dungeons & Dragons, they just did as well. They just signed a license to be able to play Dungeons & Dragons in virtual reality. I definitely see VR getting big ticket stories next year. We already saw that in the late of this year. So Star Wars having a virtual reality experience is a good example of that. On the left is a virtual reality thriller, Gone, which is going to be a serialized virtual reality thriller from the likes of the folks that brought you The Walking Dead, produced by AMC. So there are a lot of studios who are playing around with these experiences. So I would expect to see some big ticket films, some big ticket experiences be provided to you in your Gear VR or Cardboard, mostly as trailers or as additional content to get you to the movie, most likely, just like Star Wars was. And we're also going to continue to see virtual reality have a core space in film festivals like Sundance, hopefully Toronto International Film Festival. Two more things. The last two things are that VR gets more serious. So we talked a lot about all this fun stuff, and remember that big chart, AR is the serious brother of virtual reality. Well, virtual reality will also start to see some great productivity tools. The Samsung just launched the Gear browser. Again, that going back to that old medium in new medium, but imagine like that Minority Report-like experience where you have a couple of screens. But again, just going back to posture, like how many of you are sick and tired of having hunched shoulders? Wouldn't you want your browser just right here so that you can just keep your head up high? These are going to be small changes that virtual reality can bring to the table and give you that focus to block out the rest of the world. Data visualization is going to be huge. The ability to break free from pie charts and line graphs and put them in 3D space. Salesforce is already playing with this. They showed this at Dreamforce. And then the continued use of VR at work for training. You're a new Subway employee. Here, put on a virtual reality headset, and I'll show you how to make a sandwich. These types of things are what we're going to continue to see, as well as therapy and healthcare. VR will also continue to get more physical, and by that I mean that we will continue to see those accessories emerge, haptic vests such as Glove One, Hands Omni, Breck Labs here in Toronto, eye tracking, the ability for you just to use your eyes to move around or to bring your eyes in, so when I stare at that robot from AltSpace VR, it looks like it's looking back at me. Smell, Feel Real created a mask that you wear that actually has sensory repositories that push out smell that match the experience to bring that sense into the mix. And of course, especially gesture and natural controllers, Oculus Touch controllers, STEM by Sixth Sense, et cetera, et cetera. But what I mean by physical too is this play between the virtual world and the physical world. This is actually an example of a company, just want to bring up their name here. I don't have it here, but Warp out of San Francisco, which allows for you to see through the eyes of a teddy bear, a physical teddy bear. So which can be kind of creepy and kind of cool at the same time, but also this inner exchange between your drone and virtual reality, right? So this playfulness between things that are in the physical world and being able to inhabit them is what I'm starting to see as another trend. And of course, like, that's it. There was a kind of a naughty one I was going to give, but let's not end on that one. So my big thing, because I'm running out of time and I want to take a few questions, is I hope you're excited. There's a lot of opportunity here. If you're not going to be creating in this space, you're going to be playing in this space. So I thank you for your time and your presence in this reality, and hope you get into the other reality real soon. Thanks so much.